boom, 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 boom. What's up, everyone, and welcome back to yet another episode of the Off Grid podcast. It is an absolute pleasure having you back. My name is Jake, a Jakey boy, a J dog. Volume up. What's up, everyone? This is the Off Grid podcast. I do the intro twice. It's that valuable. Just in case you missed it the first time. Now, I've been getting a few DMs from you guys, and you guys are saying, like, hey, I listened to the podcast, really enjoying it. And I'm saying to you guys, I'm listening to you. Thank you very much for getting in touch. You know, that's the sort of biscuit that keeps me going. So thanks for getting in touch, those of you that have. And if you do like this podcast, tell your nan, WhatsApp her, fax her. I'll buy you a racing pigeon, whatever it takes. Now, this week I'm joined by Aaron Rolph. He is a mountain athlete, filmmaker, and ambassador for the North Face, with rail records in the greatest vertical mountain bike descent and the most countries visited by bike in 7 days. In this conversation, we talk about having style in human powered adventures, the realities of turning a hobby you love into a job, and being sent to emergency surgery when things don't go to plan and the bike stint ended up in a huge accident. We also talk about challenging perceptions of elite adventure and confronting holiday culture abroad in the UK. A lot of what Aaron has done is online in the form of films. There are these beautifully clipped 30-minute films. And the reason why I got him onto this podcast was because he's just this all-round adventurer that grew up in Cumbria in the Lake District, where there really wasn't much else to do but adventure. So he's ended up being this all-round adventure that is now based in Chamonix, essentially like the Mecca in Europe of mountain adventure. And I hope that you guys really enjoy this podcast. On with the podcast. Bum, ba-dum, ba-dum, bum, bum. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba-ba. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba-ba-da-da. I've never actually been to Chamonix, but I would imagine it's quite like international mecca of people that are just drawn to the mountains there. Is that the case?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's loads of talent in terms of like mountain athletes and photographers and filmmakers, and people are just super pumped on the outdoors. But it's also because it's got this sort of full-time population. You also have sort of normal people in inverted commas who work like a normal remote job, and a lot of people work like 4 days a week, and they're quite serious about their job during the week, and then they're just out in the weekends doing the stuff they love. So that's a cool vibe for sure.
That's the way to do it. That sounds absolutely amazing. Aaron, when I was doing my research on you, I was just feeling like this width, just there's a lot of breadth to like the stuff that you do. I was like, wow, okay. So so one minute he's like a photographer, videographer, you're a bike packer, you're a downhill racer, you're a cold water swimmer, you're a mountain biker, you're a mountaineer and a skier. I was like, wow, this guy just kind of, you feel like this all-round adventurer. What do you think shaped you to be this kind of all-round adventure guy?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, I suppose growing up in the Lake District, I've always sort of had an interest in all the adventures, whatever it is, on a boat or swimming or hiking, and obviously now skiing and also biking. But yeah, I don't know. I suppose that what draws me isn't necessarily just the activity or the kind of like just the discipline itself, but the adventure behind it, which is maybe somewhat cliche. But and it almost doesn't matter whether you're swimming or paddling or skiing. I guess it's sort of a vehicle for the adventure, if that makes sense. So I suppose just always had an interest in lots of different activities, and keeps it varied and interesting as well.
That need for adventure in your life, it's definitely a recurring theme, and I feel the same. Like everything I do is like, it's never at a point where things are kind of stable. Like there's always a pace. Like I love a bit of chaos. I love a bit of like going into the unknown. And I was wondering with you, like where do you think that need comes from? This need for adventure, this kind of thirst for like going into the unknown in your life.
Honestly, I'd love to know. It's something I've thought about quite a lot, because I don't know, it's interesting because obviously some people don't have that same sort of burning desire to do these big trips into the unknown, and it really is the unknown, I suppose, that drives a lot of these things. It's a funny one with expeditions and, you know, big adventures, because it's almost like very organized to then go and make sure that you're not organized, because the goal is to go somewhere you've never been, or ski a peak that's never been skied before, or whatever. So you do all of this preparation to do something to put yourself completely into the unknown, where you might find you don't know what's coming and whatever. But yeah, I don't know. Honestly, would love to know why that's such a key part of what drives me, but it still is to this day. And every adventure has to be something different or something new that I don't know too much about. So yeah, it runs deep, I think.
Have you ever had a level of introspection about adventure and why it is you do what you do? Would you consider yourself like an introspective character, or is it more just like, right, next adventure, just keep going and not sort of wonder
Yeah,
with the motivations?
definitely not as much as some people. I'm quite just get on with it and look to the next thing. But no, I mean, it's hard not to wonder these things when you spend obviously long periods of time in the mountains, especially if you're waiting. You know, if you're on an expedition where there's lots of time to kill, and you, especially if you're suffering, you're going to ask those questions. Why am I choosing to spend my time and money, you know, out here in Arctic Norway with a bikepacking bike that weighs 30 kilos in snow or whatever it might be? But yeah, I try to think about these things. And do you know, it's interesting, the content side, I suppose, the creating films and sort of telling stories is naturally makes you a lot more introspective, because you're sort of wondering in the process of the writing why it is you're doing this thing, or what's interesting about this adventure that you feel passionate about, and trying to convey that message to, you know, the viewer or the reader. So it definitely forces you to think a bit more about the deeper side of why. But I've still not got to many conclusions just yet. But
Have you got any idea? Like, is there any part of you that's like, oh, probably down to this thing that happened, or it's because I want this thing to happen in the future, or anything like that?
any idea for why what motivates me, you mean?
Yeah, why do you have this thirst for adventure? What is that thing where you're like, oh yeah, let's do it? What's driving you? What's the motivation?
I think for me, it's definitely a lot of it's about seeing the world, or feeling like I'm seeing the world, which from a really young age, I think that was always kind of like deep rooted in me. Like I used to like literally browse a globe, or like read an atlas, obsessing over, you know, different parts of the world and different environments that seem so foreign. And yeah, maybe, I don't know, growing up in Cumbria, where you feel somewhat quite isolated um, to the rest of the world, and obviously a very fortunate place to grow up. It's a beautiful part of the UK, but maybe it felt like all these other exotic places were so far away, and I kind of wanted to see all those places. And yeah, the way to an experience like an environment or a landscape, the best way is obviously to sort of put yourself into it with an adventure of some kind. You know, if you go on a road trip, you never really fully experience the place. If you go on a bikepacking trip where you move slower and you're really connected to the ground, or paddling or whatever it might be, it feels like a richer experience and a way to remember that place, I suppose.
Yeah, totally, mate. I find that those early years, they often really shape us. And one thing that's interesting about your experience in your childhood is that you actually were isolated. You didn't have loads of travel or loads of experience around the world, but it was just for you this kind of, I guess, idea. You know, what is, of course, you've got a physical globe in front of you, but it's more like the idea of like, oh, I wonder what that place is like, and I wonder how hot it is, and what it's like, that sort of innate intrigue. Would that be fair
Yeah,
to say?
definitely. Yeah. And I think because I actually we didn't go on that big of family holidays as a kid either. I mean, I suppose people didn't back then as much. There was a lot of like trips to Scotland or trips to Wales, that kind of thing. France occasionally. But yeah, you're right. I mean, maybe if I'd ironically seen more of the world at an early age, I wonder if I would have had that same curiosity for so long, because maybe it would have been quenched sooner in some way. I don't know.
Yeah, mate, I don't know, but in my experience, at least, I had like two travel agents. They brought me up, so I was like going and seeing the world, and I still love it. So
Yeah, yeah,
I
maybe it
can't
would have
see
just
you.
started earlier.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think there's ever like a point where you know, when people ask me why is
Completed
it,
it.
yeah, why do you go and see the world and everything? It's like, well, I always have. You know, it's like I love travel. I love living out of a backpack, and those are some of the moments where I like feel like most myself, or like I feel like most alive. And
Yeah.
it's always been that way. It's kind of this like extreme norm in a sense. Does that feel like somehow your life now? Of course, it's like quite dramatic when you bring in like big brand deals and you make a film about it and things like that. But in a sense, it could be like you are just doing what you want to do, living your life.
Yeah, for sure. And I think with the commercial element of making it your job, you've obviously got to be careful because your one true passion is travel and adventure and outdoor sport. Then it becomes necessity to earn a living. It's obviously a real sort of privilege to be able to do that. But also, there are definitely times where that can strike negatively when you're feeling pressure to deliver content or to achieve a goal for the sake of the brand and obviously to get paid. So I definitely try and still do trips for myself, try and just remove that sort of job element away from it. I think that's quite important to keep the passion as well.
What do you think are some of the misconceptions people have about turning their hobby into a profession? Because obviously from the outside, what you're doing is like so cool, and like you got all these amazing pictures of you doing like incredible mountain biking adventures. But what's the actual realities of that for you in your life and your day to day?
Yeah, that's a good question because it's definitely. I mean, I still love parts of the sort of background as well, which I think is pretty important. But definitely, the first thing I would say is like the amount of hours you spend outside versus the amount of hours on a laptop is probably 50-50 or like closer to. But you obviously don't see pictures of me at home on my laptop, drinking a coffee, writing, or whatever. There's the stuff behind the scenes still is super important. I think you have to be pretty like I suppose just incredibly resilient and determined to make it happen because it's tough nut to crack, I think, for most people. And like it doesn't happen overnight, you've got to keep chipping away. I mean, you'll know from the podcast, like you don't just say, I'm doing a podcast one day and the following day you've got, millions of listeners and all the rest of it. It takes, years to really build up like organic growth and to keep building that. So I guess I'd say it's like really important that it's so driven from passion and the outcome is a coincidence. The success is the coincidence. The process has to be the joy. And if you keep doing that and you still love it 10 years later, then maybe in 10 years you'll be making a full income from it. But if you don't love it, year 3, you'll probably quit before you get to year 10, if that makes some sense.
Totally. Yeah, that's like that sort of intrinsic motivation to really enjoy what it is you're doing and not be so focused on this external goal in order to give you a level of future satisfaction that you ultimately will think make you happier than you are right now. It's not
Yeah,
the way it works. You have to enjoy that process in the very moment. And the whole reason why I actually started this podcast was because I was like, who do I want to speak to? Like this, I love talking to people. I love hearing about their stories. I love adventure. I love people who have kind of gone off the regular path of life. And let's be honest, if we didn't have a podcast, like no one would speak to me. It's like
yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
now it's like
Way to do
selfishly,
that. Yeah,
yeah. So you get to kind of pick and choose. Like, wow, okay, I actually get to just to choose someone. I've been born in this fortunate time where I've got social media, I've got technology, I can access anyone, just DM them and see
yeah,
if they want to come on. And that whole process is wonderful. But like you said, it's almost like the thing you choose to do just ends up becoming the cherry on the cake. And the cake is everything else you need to do in order to get the cherry.
exactly.
Did I say that the
Ironically,
right way around?
I think so. Yeah. We're ending with the cherry, right? Yeah, and I suppose ultimately the like making a career out of your passion in that sense, the beauty is you get to do what you love day to day, every day, or whatever it might be. So yeah, as long as you absolutely love that part, then I definitely think it's possible to push on and eventually it can come true. But yeah, I've had the same with photography as well. That people have sort of said, I'm going to quit my job and be a photographer, and obviously that's a very noble thing to do, and like at some point it may well be successful. But my experience was it took probably like 5 years of part-timing, doing my other full-time job, and I just did with weekends what I could to sort of build that up to something that was then looking sustainable as a full-time income. So yeah, I guess just patience with it as well would be a little tip.
Yeah, it's just the things that people don't see. They sort of look at the success and assume like somehow that happened quickly, but actually all the stuff in the bag, all the editing that's happening to make that 20-minute film of yours, or just the logistics of planning a certain adventure and getting the right team involved. There's one thing particular in the way that you do your adventures that I found really interesting is your focus on being human powered. Like that's something that's big for you. And I saw with your Guinness World Record where you cycled across the most countries visited by bike in 7 days in the film Breaking Borders. One thing particularly about that I liked is just this kind of like ethics and style about the way that you do your adventures. It's not just about fitness and
Yeah.
being able to accomplish something. Is that like something that's front of your mind when you're thinking about doing adventures?
Yeah, I think for me, it's like you need to have like a deep motivation for that adventure to obviously put yourself through. Because I'm actually not like super big into endurance. Like maybe look at my CV and it might suggest otherwise, but that's like to enable this big adventure, not because I actually love the suffering for the sake of it. Like I would never go for a 30-kilometer run just for the sake of training. Never. Like it's all about like having some big adventure that sort of demands the fitness to get yourself to the end goal. But I was going to say, like, I guess with the sort of style element is like the motivation for me is always doing something quite grand, and like what excites me is the sort of the thing that intimidates me that I don't know if I can do. And I suppose in doing so, then you need to have like a bit of a set of rules. And if you feel like you're just part-time or like jumping in and out, or you're not doing it in this like clean-cut way, then it isn't as motivating, and then I probably wouldn't be as focused to get it done, if that makes any sense. So like
So
the style becomes important to sort of ensure motivation to do these big goals, and the bigger the goal, the more motivated you'll be.
yeah,
Yeah,
I feel like there is quite a bit of focus now on the fitness element. Maybe it's the internet, maybe it's social media, but this idea of like you stood on a mountain, like you like jacked up, or like you look the real deal. But actually, people are now kind of more focused on the fitness and looking the real deal than using that as a tool to go and do cool stuff.
yeah.
Have you found that yourself?
Yeah, definitely. I suppose that, as you say, it's probably social media driven and image driven, that people are probably more excited to look like they're doing the cool thing than actually do the cool thing, maybe. But yeah, I think that's probably a little bit more prevalent. And like you go back to like mountaineering in the old days, like in the 50s, you read some like Chris Bonington's books and some of the guys who were doing like really exploration mountaineering, they barely had any pictures of the things that they did sometimes, and they had like no style, like wearing dodgy kit that probably wasn't even doing the job, and they're just so psyched and motivated to be out there. And that's kind of that old school mentality I try to sort of bring back to that if I can, at any point.
Yeah, I love that. I love this idea of like the old school adventurers who are just like proper hardy and they don't need to tell everyone that they're doing it, or it's just actually for the purpose of going on this adventure and trying to accomplish something. And there was actually one story that I looked into because I was enjoying your sense of human powered style. And I don't know if you have heard of this guy, um, Captain Matthew Webb. He is the first Englishman to swim the length of the channel, which he did in 1875, uh, on only consuming brandy, coffee, and beef broth over 21 hours. And he strictly did it in the form of breaststroke because doing front crawl would be ungentlemanly.
I love it. Do you get a lot of those stories from mountaineering as well, especially here in the Alps? Like a lot of the first ascents of big peaks in the Alps were done by Brits, and they were definitely aristocratic, like loads of money. They hired guides and then had these like massive, basically parties on the glacier where people would be like hauling up wine so they could have a big feast before they go up. And it's not necessarily how I do it, but you got to rate there, yeah, the attitude of it, just getting stuck in and happy to have a drink and have some fun. I suppose maybe it's just like keeping the fun of that and not and maybe that's what I sort of push back on with, like you're saying, with some of the social media age, is like it just feels a bit too serious. Some people are so about performance, and just forget that we're out here. No one's. It's not like a life and death thing unless someone's in trouble. It's just so we can have a good time or have a nice experience, and like ultimately maybe keeping that focus of enjoying the mountains without taking yourself too seriously is kind of cool way to do it in my eyes.
Yeah, just take your eyes off the LinkedIn bio for a sec, and think about the experience, because people want those bullet points, like 2 times Everest summit and like K2 tick, and it's like, okay, cool, but like, how was the experience? Did you enjoy it, and did you learn something from it? And those are the bits where like the real, like, like tangible good shit is going on, where you're learning about yourself and all this. And I read a book. It's called "Let My People Go Surfing" by Yvon Chouinard. He's the founder of Patagonia. Really great book. It's kind of like split into different chapters as to how his life adventuring has like combined with business philosophy. And one of the things he talks about is this idea, both in business and in adventure, is comparing scaling a business to summiting Mount Everest. So what he does is he says someone can build £1 million business. Yeah, like, great job, pat on the back. That's great. Someone can summit Everest. Like, nice one, cool. But how did they do it? And those are the bits that really count. Did they summit Everest with no O, or did they get like 10 oxygen tanks? Did they like have the best tent in Everest base camp, and they got 20 Sherpas and
Yeah,
like,
we're carrying all the loads up, and they're not actually. They're sort of like using a fixed line, just taking themselves up, not in any kind of alpine style. Which, like, I get that's how Himalayan big peaks are done, but I couldn't agree more. Yeah, like the style is so important, and maybe as you say, I think people just lose focus on the sort of box ticking element that people can easily fall into and forget that it's about an experience, and the way in which you do that is probably pretty important. And actually, yeah, he sort of goes back a bit to what we were talking about before, doesn't he? Because he's sort of built a business accidentally, almost, of loving his kind of dirtbag climber lifestyle, creating some cool kit, and then accidentally becoming one of the most influential outdoor brands in the world in the process. So that's a good example of someone who could build successfully, not for the end goal, but actually for the process.
Yeah, absolutely. And it came from a need of him being his own customer, right? Like, he's a rock climber. All of his mates are rock climbers. They're like, guys, we need better. Is it piton? We need better pitons to climb this rock. Like, these aren't good enough. So let's just make our own. And then other climbers are like, hey, like, can we have some? He's like, well, yeah, but it's going to cost you a bit. And then the business is rolling. And that's almost like the most, I guess the word would be like, organic way to lean into what it is you enjoy and end up forming an incredible career doing that thing.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I think if people focus entirely on what makes them sort of tick and use that passion to drive them, then probably career opportunities within that space will come available naturally, um, rather than chasing this end goal that you have in your mind. But actually, the process is more important.
Yeah, totally. And there's something you were saying about like kind of demystifying elite adventure, like some of these old school guys who are Brits getting to the top. They haven't got all the kit. They don't have like the brand sponsorship and all of this sort of thing. They're doing elite routes with minimal kit, and this is something that you do in your adventures as well. When you were doing your 125-kilometer ski traverse across the Alps, was it the Haute route in
Yeah,
31 hours?
the
It's sort of like pushing those human limits, and how it's kind of, I guess, now changed over time to focus a bit more on like looking the real deal and things like that. But what have you gained from just shredding the kit, and what's the philosophy behind that?
Yeah, I mean, for that project, I just didn't want to wear lycra mostly, which most most of the guys who do big schema stuff, really love the lycra clad suit. That's not my vibe. So.
Was it fashion first?
It's fashion based primarily. Yeah, no, it's fine. I mean, that was a kind of a good example of like the motivation stuff. Is that I just always kind of had this concept since I did it the first time in the normal format, which takes sort of 6-7 days. I just had this idea that maybe it would be possible for me to try and single push it in effectively one day. And I'm not like the fastest skier or the fittest. It was more I'd just be willing to keep going for 31 hours straight, and get there to the side. But yeah, I did it in actually quite a good like ski that's not sort of super lightweight. It's in the kind of middle ground that's fun to ski. I just did it in normal ski clothing, and yeah, we got there in the end, but it took a little while. Long day out.
Feels like you're proving a point. Feels like you're sort of looking at these guys and like you're like, no, that's not for me, and I want to show that it can be done in minimal kit. Is there this sort of driver behind you where you want to show people that, you know, it can be done in the most rudimentary of kit and gear?
Yeah, for sure. And I think, to be fair, that project had a different angle a little bit as well, because I learned to ski quite late in life at 21. So it was thought for me, and especially I'm quite a big guy, I'm 95 kilos. I'm not, the usual alpine endurance guy. So I suppose it was a little bit like showing that a normal person can try and go and do these big challenges and get themselves out there if they set the sights on it. You can do sort of things that you wouldn't maybe imagine was possible.
Super cool. Absolutely love that. I think that's great because it's one thing looking at people you don't know achieving great things, but that's another thing when you realize that they're just people, like they're just ordinary people who had a hobby or an interest in something, or they run the local gym in town, and on the weekend decided to summit the mountain. And then it kind of hits home that actually, like, adventure isn't just for these like big names and big hits where you're like loads of followers or whatever it is. You can just be like you're saying in Chamonix, these like delightfully normal people who just do incredible things.
Totally, yeah. And I think it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because if you're an elite athlete who can dedicate a full-time job to these things, then it stands to reason you should be pretty fit and in good shape. But if you're a weekend warrior who has to work, maybe some of these guys have kids as well. They're going home after work, after working a 8, 9, 10-hour day, and they're still then finding some energy and juice and motivation to go and do these big adventures. Then I almost think that's a lot more commendable and impressive than the elite athlete professional who's been conditioning all of their life for that goal.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can apply that to so many other things in life as well. Like just this idea that like if you're seeing someone like Ross Edgley or whatever, he's just swam around the coast of Iceland in the Arctic Sea, and it's like you look at him and it's like, wow, look at him, he's in such great shape, he's achieving so much. It's like every waking minute is to that goal. He's got a team who's feeding him, who's making sure he's got a bed. Like that is his life right now. And I feel like a lot of people sort of, they don't see that bit. They don't see the bit where it's like, oh, these people achieving amazing things who are doing cool stuff. Actually, that is it. That is their life, and they're committing fully towards that. Have you found like your lifestyle is geared in that way?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah, going back to what I was saying a bit before, like I mean, someone like him, he has an unbelievable amount of resources as well. Like he's made it to that sort of celebrity status and got Red Bull supporting him, like he has everything he could ever want, it is still incredible achievements. There's no disrespect to him at all, but I still find, yeah, the sort of the amateur who's going out and doing it on the side is still, for me, probably more impressive. And I think also I've always had an interest and sort of preference of self-supported missions as well. I think there's an element of like the adventure that's really important for me is the sort of self-reliance. And if you're doing a supportive adventure where you've got, these big teams, you've got physios, you've got nutritionists, it's not the same as the adventure because you're having lots of the important things done for you. And really the unknown of the adventure comes without that sort of support network around you. And then it's becoming, when it's that supported, it's becoming all about the physical element and not about the adventure.
Yeah, totally get that. This idea of just actually not being, be prepared, absolutely be prepared for whatever it is you're undertaking. Make sure that you're going to be safe and things like this. But some of those best adventures I've ever had are those moments where you just sort of, you're with your mates and you're in the middle of nowhere and you're like, oh, I wonder how this is going to go down. And it's like, that's kind of the excitement of it all. And if you were to just be like, okay, we're going to go here, and then when it's 5 hours A to B, and blah blah blah, we're going to meet the team. I could see how that takes a lot of the psychological element of adventure out the window. How have you found that in your career as you've progressed and brands have come in, your filmmaking, so it does become commercialized? How have you found that balance between doing things that you really enjoy and also maintaining that sort of psychological element of adventure?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think one thing the friends that I go on adventures with would say is that I like not to plan too much. And obviously there's a convenience of that sometimes. If you have loads of trips back to back, it sometimes can take too long to make a plan every ninth detail. But like I think honestly I sort of really enjoy the idea to deliberately book the minimum, organize the minimum, and try and just let the adventure play out. And maybe that's an A to B, where you want to start, where you want to finish. You don't know where you're going to stay every night. You don't know exactly where the best campsites are. You don't know where you're going to get all your fuel for the trip or whatever. And obviously some expeditions you can't do that because it's so remote, you'd be in trouble and you need to plan to a certain level. But if stuff like bike packing, or if you're staying kind of within civilization, you're never going to be too far away from a shop, then I think just probably it would encourage people to not plan every single detail and just let the sort of flow of the adventure come and take its path, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And likewise, you can plan as much as you want, but things are going to happen where it doesn't go to plan. And one thing that happened to you in your adventures where you could plan it to meticulous detail, but when you're in bike park in Wales and you had a really bad crash, you had to go in for emergency surgery. Can you talk me through it a little bit? Is that all right? Talk through a bit about
Yeah,
what happened there.
yeah, definitely. All right. Yeah, I managed to stay out of hospital for like 30 years, and then it got me in pretty bad in one go. But we were doing a big adventure from the Isles of Scilly, and the idea was to cycle all the way up to the Shetlands. So we were basically sort of doing anything but the shortest route, so trying to take in the best of the UK wild spaces, basically. And yeah, we got to Wales, and I was at the bike park, and basically just hadn't ridden in a little while, and got a bit overexcited. Wanted to hit this big pro line with sort of 45, 50-foot jump, and came short on it and managed to sever my colon. So yeah, cut an organ in half and basically had to go straight to Cardiff hospital. So to put a bit of a damper on the trip, but yeah, then managed to get some amazing care from the NHS and got surgery that day. And it's funny, it was actually the saddle that caused the blunt trauma to my stomach, which caused the colon to split. And the surgeon came to me the next day and he was like, unbelievable. Like he said, it was done with a scalpel. It was so perfectly cut, completely cut perfectly into two. And he said it was really good, smooth surgery. You're all fixed kind of thing. But yeah, you would never imagine that a saddle could do that much damage. But we did go back and restart the project from the same place. What must have been about almost a year later. And eventually I did make it to the Shetlands and all is fine in the end.
So you went back. Was that unfinished business?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, do you know, it was primarily just because the route was, I was so excited about the route because I'd never done like a Land's End to John O'Groats type of thing. And it's dawned on me that why would you cycle the full length of the country and do it on the most direct route? Because that's not the most interesting places to go to in the UK. So then creating this route became almost like a love letter to, the wild spaces of the UK. And with the film that we were quite passionate about shooting, it was trying to really showcase how incredible these places are and that more people should probably go and utilize, these amazing spots. So yeah, to go back was obviously post injury was felt significant for my mental recovery, I suppose, to kind of continue on with the trip, and then also to finish, the project that we'd planned so much, and the film that we were really excited to shoot. So
Yeah, I'm really glad you finished it because I can relate to that feeling of like this sort of like you need to go and finish that adventure that you set out to do. And I've got a sense that you're quite single-minded. If you say you're going to do something, then you're probably going
yeah,
to do it. I've seen like what you're doing with British Adventure Collective, and you're just very big advocate for like people getting out and about in England. So I thought I'd just finish up on like what is it you think that the Brits are missing? Because whenever we get holiday, we're out of here. Like I'm going to Parma or
crazy.
like,
I say
it's
this, there's an irony, isn't it? Because I say this living in the Alps, but I do. I
forget
really,
about the UK.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I do firmly believe that the UK has some of the best spots for adventure. The only reason I live in the Alps, honestly, is skiing and is winter sports, which obviously the UK can't quite supply consistently. But yeah, I think we're just deep rooted to holiday culture, to going abroad, and I guess that's from a good place of intrigue and travel, and culture and food and different kind of going and experiencing different places. But it just strikes me that we totally overlook our own backyard and in favor of going to places that maybe aren't actually any more interesting. Maybe it's also weather orientated, which I can relate. If you're going to book a holiday, then you want it to be somewhere that you're not going to get rained on every day. But if in terms of weekend adventures, like take me into Scotland and the Highlands of Scotland on a bikepacking trip, staying in a bothy any day of the week. And that would be to me the same amount of adventure as anywhere in the world, for sure.
Yeah, love that. Just explore your own backyard because there's so much out there than we think there is. And one of the reasons I love living in this country so much is that so much can change in a 2-hour drive. Like you can be in a completely different place where people speak differently, the culture's different, and you're in the same country just 2 hours away. It's one thing I really love. Aaron, what have you got coming next? You got your book coming out. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah. I've been shooting a sort of alpine refuge book, sort of taking in the best alpine refuges around the world. It's primarily Alps focused because we tend to have the best ones in my eyes are in the Alps, but it does cover global ones. So that was a case of going to bivouacs, sort of smaller huts, and then as well as some of the bigger refuges. And it was just something I love, the sort of extreme contrast where you can be in a brutal storm in the Alps and it feels like it's completely, you're not going to survive at some points. And then you can get inside a refuge, get the fire on, you're eating good food. And I think I kind of love the contrast of the extremes of the discomfort with the comfort. And there's such an amazing, hut infrastructure, particularly in the Alps, that I wanted to sort of showcase the best ones that I've come across over the years. So just finished that. It's coming out in a month and will be available to buy through Gestalten, which is the publisher. And then I'm actually going to South Georgia on a project in 2 weeks, which is the island off Antarctica. So that'll be a big one as well.
Sounds awesome. Brilliant. Great adventures ahead of you. And thanks a lot for sharing all your stories of adventure. And it's really cool to speak to a guy that grew up in a place where you're just in the same place in Cumbria, and then you've gone and lived this life of real adventure and pushing your own limits and doing it in your own way. That's one thing that I thought was particularly cool about your adventures. So thanks a lot for coming on. It's been good having you on.
That's very kind, Jake. Thank you. Yeah, good to chat.
Cheers, mate.